Jonah was a humble farmer who lived in a small village. He wasn't the richest man in the village, but he was blessed with fertile land, strong hands, and a loving family. 4 years, Jonah tilled the soil, planted seeds, and reaped bountiful harvests. His family never went hungry, and he had enough to share with his neighbors and the less fortunate. Jonah often went to church and thanked God for his blessings. He would kneel in prayer, saying, "Thank you, Lord, for providing for me and my family." The villagers admired Jonah for his faith and generosity. One year, Jonah's land yielded an especially large harvest. His barns overflowed with grain, and his fields shimmered with golden crops. Everyone in the village marveled at his good fortune. Jonah, however, began to change. Instead of thanking God, Jonah began to boast about his hard work. "Look at what I have achieved," he said to his neighbors. "It is my strength and skill that have brought me this success." Jonah stopped going to church, stopped helping his neighbors, and became consumed with pride. He built bigger barns to store his crops, keeping everything for himself. His wife and children grew worried. "Jonah," his wife pleaded, "don't forget that it is God who has blessed us." But Jonah dismissed her words. Months passed, and Jonah's fields were still full of crops. One night, as Jonah sat in his barn counting his grain, a sudden storm rolled in. Thunder roared and lightning lit up the sky. Heavy rain poured down, flooding Jonah's fields. By morning, his crops were ruined. Jonah ran outside, staring in disbelief. The flood had washed away all that he had worked for. His barns were damaged, and the crops he had stored were soaked and rotting. Jonah fell to his knees and cried, "Why has this happened to me?" A neighbor, a kind old man named Samuel, came to comfort him. "Jonah," Samuel said gently, "do you remember the story in the Bible? It says in Deuteronomy 8 verse 18, 'But remember the Lord your God, for it is He who gives you the ability to produce wealth.' You forgot to thank God, Jonah. Instead of giving Him glory, you took all the credit. That pride has led to your fall." Jonah's heart was pierced with guilt. He realized Samuel was right. He had been ungrateful and had turned his back on the one who had blessed him. Jonah humbled himself and prayed, "Lord, I am sorry for my pride and ingratitude. Please forgive me and teach me to always be thankful." Though Jonah's crops were gone, the villagers came together to help him. They shared food and helped repair his barn. Jonah was overwhelmed by their kindness and thanked God for giving him a second chance. From that day on, Jonah became a changed man. He worked hard but always remembered to thank God for his blessings. He returned to church, helped his neighbors, and taught his children the importance of gratitude. Jonah learned the hard way that ingratitude can lead to loss and sorrow, but a humble heart that remembers God will always find grace. One day, while Jonah was planting new seeds in his field, a young boy from the village approached him. "Mr. Jonah," the boy said, "how do you keep smiling even after losing everything?" Jonah paused, wiped the sweat from his brow, and smiled. "When I lost everything, I thought I had no reason to smile," he admitted. "But then I realized something important. My crops and wealth were never truly mine. They were gifts from God. When I stopped thanking Him and became proud, I lost sight of what really mattered. Now, I smile because I trust that God's plans are always good, even when I don't understand them." The boy nodded thoughtfully and ran off to tell his parents what Jonah had said. As time passed, Jonah's fields began to flourish again. The new crops were not as abundant as the ones he had before, but they were enough to provide for his family. More importantly, Jonah's heart was full. He had learned to value gratitude, humility, and community over material wealth. One evening, as the sun set over the village, Jonah gathered his family around their small table for dinner. The meal was simple: bread, vegetables, and a little cheese, but the atmosphere was rich with love and gratitude. Jonah took his wife's hand and looked at his children. "Let us never forget," he said, "that everything we have is a blessing from God. Whether we have much or little, we must always be thankful." His youngest daughter, Sarah, asked, "Will God give us another big harvest, Papa?" Jonah chuckled and replied, "That is up to Him. But remember, Sarah, it's not the size of the harvest that matters, it's the size of your heart. A grateful heart is the greatest blessing of all." The family bowed their heads in prayer, thanking God for their food, their home, and each other. Years later, Jonah's story spread throughout the village, inspiring others to live with gratitude and humility. His life became a testimony of God's grace and a reminder of the dangers of pride and ingratitude. One day, long after Jonah had grown old, a stranger passing through the village heard his story. The stranger approached Jonah, who was sitting under a tree, enjoying the sight of his grandchildren playing in the fields. "Sir," the stranger said, "I've heard of your story and how you lost everything because of ingratitude. Yet here you are, surrounded by blessings. How did you find peace? Jonah smiled, his face wrinkled with age but glowing with wisdom. Peace comes from trusting God, he said. I learned that everything we have is temporary